My friends, my extended family, welcome to episode number 320 of the Anxiety Guy podcast. Today we are interviewing Nicole Ryan, a good friend of mine online, a very inspiring person, a life coach specializing in boundary setting and codependency recovery, along with dealing with narcissism within relationships. Nicole, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and talking to you and all of your listeners. So thank you.
I love it. And I thought this interview would be very, very important for people out there because these are ideas and topics I don't really discuss much within relationships and such. So I want to dive deep and pick your brain on a number of questions today. And then I would love for you to tell us how we can contact you later on in the episode so that people can ask you questions and connect with your coaching sessions and such. Let's get right into this right away. How were you led to this kind of very specific and important work? How were you led into this?
So my story starts with sort of in my very late 20s. I'm in my late 30s now. I'm 39. And in my late 20s, early 30s, I started having some realizations. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. I knew I had anxiety, and I'll get to kind of how it ties in a little bit, but I knew something was up. And I am married. I have in-laws, and of course, my family of origin. We all live pretty close by each other. And I noticed that there were some patterns with certain people that I had picked up on over the years, that I noticed over the years that were deeply troubling to me, let's say. And I had always had this anxiety, but I didn't know where it really came from. And so I started exploring relationships and why people were acting a certain way in these relationships. Now, this wasn't a big, everyone in my family is a narcissist thing, right? It was just more of a exploratory stage at that point.
I see.
And I didn't relate anxiety to having been emotionally abused, let's say, or narcissistically abused for even a few years after that. But that was sort of the starting point. I was struggling in a relationship not with my husband. We have been married 16 years, but I was struggling in a relationship with an extended family member. And I internalized it and I blamed myself over and over and over. And I tried to modify my behavior and my actions, my words, my thought patterns to the point where damned if you do, damned if you don't. And so I kept internalizing that blame and that shame and that guilt. And really it started eating me up. And I had already had anxiety, but this sort of made that storm a little bit more, a little bit bigger.
Okay.
And I started realizing from that a lot of the codependent and people-pleasing traits, behaviors, thought patterns, faulty programming that I had picked up due to my upbringing.
So when you have those, when you repress the guilt and repress all that kind of negative energy that you're dealing with within the relationship and your own beliefs and such, what does that feel like? Does it feel like it's like a compounding effect? Like you must have gotten to the point where you said, I'm feeling X, or I'm always thinking this way, and I'm kind of dissatisfied with it, and I want to go another direction. Tell me about what you feel when you're dealing with this stuff within a relationship. What are some of the sensations, symptoms, thought patterns? What's going on the inside that starts to compound?
It is like you're having a fight with yourself.
Fight with yourself.
Because trying to figure out, it's inner turmoil. And for me, the feeling I attribute, the general feeling, this is just for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of other anxiety sufferers or people who experience anxiety, the warriors out there can probably relate. It's a feeling of being trapped and physically and mentally, emotionally, right? It's this feeling of like, I can't get to somebody. We can't fix this. And you feel trapped in that inner turmoil of, well, what did I do wrong? Am I wrong or bad? And you really, really internalize that blame and shame. So it's all these feelings that are trapped. Like you said, it compounds over time. It builds over time. It's almost like a pressure cooker, and it just builds and builds until you realize I've got to do something about this, and what I've been doing isn't working. So I need to change my behavior. And that's really the moment where a lot of the light bulb moments went off for me, because I realized I can't change this person, or I can't change my family of origin, the system that I came from. So I have to look inside myself and say, what can I really do here? And if what can I really do means doing nothing, then that's the answer. So for me, that feeling was trapped, and I didn't want to feel trapped anymore. So the sensations were, a lot of anxiety sensations and symptoms, especially when I was around certain people or going to be. It would be, for me, just like a numbness. Stomach stuff, that tunnel vision, that sort of sometimes shortness of breath, panicky feelings, not necessarily a full-blown panic attack, but just that low breathing, that, really hyperventilating sort of feeling. Gotcha. Anxiety, yeah. Then it started pervading into other areas of my life, and it started affecting everything, day to day.
Tell me this. What are some of the reasons for people staying in relationships like this? What is the biggest motivator? What keeps them going through this suffering, this pain and such? What keeps them in the relationship? They know they got to get out of it. They know there's something wrong here, but what keeps them in the relationship?
I think there's a few different answers to that. And what I have found is, if you are in a relationship of any kind, a friendship, you have a family member who is narcissistic or just toxic for you, you have a marriage or a partnership or whatever type of relationship you have with this person. I think a lot of it's so deeply ingrained in us that try at these relationships. It's deeply ingrained that you need to keep trying, right? That there's sort of a turn the other cheek or be kind. You have to be nice. Just let it go. And people don't understand how pervasive, especially if it's a really narcissistic type of person or a narcissist, they have a pathological pattern of behavior. It's a pattern. It's not just a one-time fight and people go, oh, that person's a narcissist. That's not how this works. It's a systematic problem as a whole in our society. And it's also, and I know we're going to talk about boundaries, which I can't wait to, that's super important, but it's a systematic problem. But it's also a familial issue. There's generational trauma in families that trickles down with this stuff. And it's hard to get out of, because for a lot of people, it's the norm. And I think the more we talk about it, people say, oh, there's stats out there that say 2%, 5% of the population is narcissistic or diagnosed NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And a narcissist isn't going to go to therapy because they think he or she is a narcissist, right? So I think there's actually probably more people that are diagnosed. A lot of people with anxiety and depression, for example, finally do go to therapy. Not everybody does, but a lot of people go to therapy. So it's diagnosed, and it's it's taken into account in like DSM, right, or in journals or psychological journaling and stuff like that. But narcissistic personality disorder, I think it's hard to get away from these people and get out of relationships because they go through a cycle of abuse with their victims. They love bomb in the beginning. They're very, very into you, and family members do other family members too. Romantic relationships as well. They love bomb. They're very into you. They mirror you a lot. We have so much in common. You're my soulmate. And I'm not talking about complimenting. I'm talking about people who lay it on really thick and are really schmoozy and really just, they act like you are the only person that matters to them, and it's too much too soon almost. And then you have the devalue discard phase where they start minimizing you. Family does this too. They minimize, they take you down a peg, then they discard you. They break up with you, or they stop talking to you. They just kind of throw you away, basically. Then they try to suck you back in. And there's what's called hoovering, like the Hoover vacuum. They try to suck you back in. They try to give you gifts again. They try to send you texts, call you, etc. And then oftentimes what a narcissist will do, they'll start a smear campaign. They'll go to everyone you know, mutual friends, family, etc., and they'll make stuff about you. They'll talk poorly about you to make you look like the bad guy when essentially you're not. And of course, they're doing all of this, chaos and drama, etc. And it's very pervasive, right? It spreads. It's very pervasive. They get a lot of enablers on their side. A lot of people who, we can talk about codependency, of course. A lot of people who are codependent or who identify as being codependent will get into relationships with narcissists because they mirror and they say, oh, this person likes me. I'm validated. Right. So they at validation, and it can be very difficult to get out of it. There's what's known as a trauma bond. There's a lot of trauma there. Then they say, I love you. And then it's that back and forth, right? So there's a lot. It's like a warfare, really.
I think there's a lot of people just listening so far in this podcast that are just starting to bring to their awareness some of the things that they were unaware of. I know right now I'm sensing it. It's coming up in a few days, the episode, but I think they're starting to go, wow, something here is really speaking to me, and I need to look deeper into this, things I haven't been aware of before. But self-respect and self-worth plays a tremendous amount on staying in the relationship and taking the abuse that you get from a specific narcissist. With you particularly, did you start to feel like, I'm worthy of more than this? I need to respect myself more in order for me to see beyond the habits I'm kind of engaged in. Was self-respect and self-worth a big part of this journey for you and everybody else you work with?
Yes, self-respect, self-worth, self-esteem building, and more importantly than that, I would say self-compassion. Having compassion for yourself and say, okay, because a lot of people get really mad at themselves. Oh, I was so conned. I was so tricked. I've been in this relationship. I stuck around with this family unit for too long, and they beat themselves up. And then that leads to that self-sabotage. They also think that they can change the other person. We can't change anybody. So we need to let go of that thought pattern, that thought process, and those behaviors. But when you're in that trauma bond, it can be really hard to break, right? So we need to have some self-compassion and really understand that there are more people out there in this human experience going through these types of relationships than we realize. And when I was going through what I went through with some family members, it was like, wow, like no one's going to believe me. I mean, people did, but the more I started talking about it, just my experience, and the more I started really learning about it, and then now coaching people who've gone through it and who are looking to set boundaries and overcome codependency and people pleasing, the more you realize that there's a lot of people out there who have gone through very similar things. So I think that's important too. But when we have never taught self-worth, when we've only been taught to parent please, and we've been raised that way, and we become people pleasers, we're taught to look outside of ourselves for that validation. So we're seeking to rescue and fix, and we're very other focused. And that doesn't mean that we're not of service and we're not kind people. That's not the opposite of that, but we're other focused. We're focused too much on other people and fixing and rescuing and what they think of us and their validation, etc. And that is a lot of that low self-esteem, that low self-worth, because we're just looking for other people to fill us up. And it's never going to happen. We're always going to be empty until we really validate ourselves and find our own self-worth. And a lot of that comes through self-compassion practice. I see.
And let's go into boundaries, because I know you talk a lot about boundaries and the importance of boundaries. let's go into boundaries within the initial stages of this change. Someone goes, some kind of information comes to them and they realize, hey, there's a change that needs to happen here on the inside and within the relationships. So within the first couple weeks, let's say, what do you do in terms of boundaries? Let's get really practical here if we can. So a person knows. Now let's go into boundaries.
Well, boundaries are for you, not for other people. And a person who is a narcissist, let's say, or a very toxic, misaligned individual, they're not going to respect your boundaries. You're talking about practicality. That's part of the practicality of this. That type of person isn't going to go, oh, okay, you have boundaries now. I get it. Okay. They're going to fight you on it a little bit, but you have to stick to your boundaries. And I say boundaries are the most authentic decisions we make for ourselves about what we will and won't tolerate in our lives. And that up with your core values, which lines up with your future vision, your future focused vision for yourself. And I always ask clients who have gone through these really bad relationships with parents or with ex-partners, I say, is this what you want in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Because that's not going to change. I mean, maybe they will, but why are we focused on that, right? It's up to us to only change ourselves. We can do that through boundaries, which when you set boundaries, you start to overcome people pleasing because you start looking inward and thinking, well, what do I want and how do I feel? And a lot of people haven't asked themselves that, especially if they're in that kind of a relationship where they were raised by those kind of individuals in a narcissistic family unit or by a narcissistic parent. So they get out in the world and they develop relationships. And a lot of times, a lot of us, we get into relationships with what we feel or who we feel is normal to us. And then we repeat those patterns. And so we learn from them. But boundaries, very authentic decisions. What feels authentic and aligned to you? And some people go, I don't even know what that is. Take your time. Take your time. And again, you said the practicality of it. A person who's narcissistic isn't going to go, oh, you have boundaries now, so our relationship's all better. You need to be firm. You need to be direct. You need to be assertive. And if you're not, you need to start practicing that. Don't wait till you're confident. Don't wait till your anxiety is gone and your fear about boundaries is gone. It's like you have to just move through that fear, right? You have to just do the thing you're scared of. And I know it's a lot of people who haven't set boundaries. It's like learning a new language. You're going to make mistakes. Again, self-compassion. Be gentle with yourself. Give yourself some grace with this. Don't think you're going to set a boundary with someone and say, hey, I don't like that you said that to me. If you do it again, I'm going to leave. Or, hey, no, I can't go to blah, blah, blah with you on that night. I can go that day. And if the person throws a fit, I mean, it doesn't mean you're a narcissist. It just means maybe you're not lined up. You're married like I am. You can have conversations about day-to-day boring stuff. Hey, can you please make sure you do X, Y, or Z? My husband and I have these conversations with each other all the time. A lot of it's about communication. Now, when you're in a healthy relationship, boundaries make that relationship better. When you're not, and you're trying to set boundaries with a person who's narcissistic or toxic, I like the term misaligned. I'm going to start using that a little bit more. But misaligned with you, they're misaligned within themselves. They're not going to get it. It's okay. It doesn't mean they're a bad person, but it just means they don't understand boundaries. And I think a lot of people don't understand boundaries. They think boundaries means cutting people off, cutting people out. We're done. Like cutting off a family member, right? And oftentimes when there's abuse going on, emotional, verbal, whatever, other kinds, yeah, that's necessary. But boundaries are really about asserting yourself. What are your wants and needs? Being direct and coming from an emotionally mature place with empathy and compassion. That's the boundary setting and asking yourself inside yourself, what do I want and how do I feel? Codependent people pleasers have a hard time with this. You got to practice it, right? That's part of it. You asked about practicality. That's part of it. It's practice. It's learning a new skill set. And when you're better at it, better and better and better at it, it's like a muscle. It just builds over time. And boundaries, for me, overcoming people pleasing, setting boundaries in a business I used to have, setting boundaries with relationships with my extended family and my family of origin, doesn't mean I cut everyone off and I said, oh, I'm not talking to any of you anymore. Just meant that more boundaries with my time with them were set, with what I told them was set. with what I tell them was set, etc. Right? So boundaries are super important. Once I did that, it's not like anxiety just went away, but it definitely helped me to protect my energy and to understand what was really important to me in my life, to have that, it quieted me down a lot. So I wasn't all, again, looking out, telling everybody everything, talking to everybody about everything, doing all the things for everybody. You get quiet and you go, okay, this is what I want and this is how I feel. And then you take it. But don't beat yourself up if you back off on a boundary because you're just new to this and you told your mom you weren't coming for Thanksgiving yesterday. She threw a fit and then you went. That's what's happening with a lot of people. But just have that self-compassion and start small. Start small. So it depends what kind of relationship you're in. It depends who you're dealing with. But start small and just remember that boundaries are for you and not for other people. They're not negotiable. And that doesn't mean that you're super hard-nosed or that you're super stubborn and that you're doing it to be mean. I often find, and I had this conversation over on social media this past week, especially with the holidays here in the States coming up. We had Thanksgiving. Now we're having more holidays in December, of course, is that family members, especially with these gatherings, are getting really upset because people are saying, I'm not coming, or I'm coming for 2 or 3 hours, not the whole day or not the whole weekend or a couple days, whatever day it falls on. And I tell people I work with and just on social media, just chit-chatting, I say, you're not setting a boundary to be mean. You're setting a boundary because you're being kind to yourself. So just remember that. The people who aren't respecting your boundaries probably never respected you to begin with. That's why you're setting a boundary with them. You're setting a boundary because you're being kind to yourself, not because you're being mean. And I also say set boundaries from the offense and not the defense. Be proactive and not reactive, and start really making it a priority for you in your life, not just because of one person, but because of yourself.
Wow, you're good. I love it. I love it. If in the beginning of this kind of change, if the other person or people are reacting in a way that's unexpected to you, do a lot of these people who have been people pleasers, do they tend to go back to those old ways of being? Is there that back and forth game for a while until you get to the point where you've associated so much pain to being in this relationship? I mean, let's go into that back and forth a little bit. What would you tell somebody who says, well, I'm setting boundaries, I'm doing these things, I'm more knowledgeable now and such, but I'm just not connecting with this person the way we used to when there was pain and suffering. So what do you do there? You just keep going.
Well, again, self-compassion. Don't beat yourself up, because then you'll start self-sabotaging and you will go right back into those old patterns, because you'll just continue. When you set boundaries with a partner, or maybe it's a soon-to-be former partner, maybe it's a former friend, maybe it's just a tense relationship of any kind, let's say, right? You're setting a boundary. You're changing the dynamic, because now you're changing, so the dynamic is going to shift. That's the reality of this. And that's why people have so much anxiety about setting boundaries, because they know, once they do, they know this. They won't admit it, but they know this. The dynamic will shift.
It's like a new relationship, isn't it?
It's like a new relationship.
I mean, it's like you're starting over again.
It can be.
Yeah.
Or that person just doesn't like your no, and you just can't control you, manipulate you, or gaslight you anymore. They don't like it.
Right.
And so kind of fall to the wayside and you get on with your life, because your boundaries are about your core values. You're not aligning with this person anymore, because now you are really in tune with your internal boundary system of your core values, whatever that is for you. There's a lot of them, and your future focused vision for yourself. That doesn't allow being manipulated, controlled, and gaslit by that person if that's what that person is doing in an unhealthy relationship. So yeah, the dynamic is going to change. When I set boundaries with my parents, the dynamic did change. And it was one of, I'm an adult child now. I'm not going to be treated the way you're treating me. And if you do, I'm leaving. So that was that. We don't have a strained relationship by any means. I did set those boundaries. If my parent or parents don't like them, I say, and it's easier said than done, but it is on them. It's not on us to expect that other people like or don't like our boundaries. We can kind of guess what's going to happen with certain people, but yeah, I think once we set boundaries, if you're setting boundaries, Dennis, if I'm setting boundaries right now with someone for the first time, let's say, and we've gone along with things with this person for so long, a family member, whoever it is, right? And all of a sudden we're like, nope, not doing that. That's our right to say no. I say it's your basic human right to stick up for yourself, period. So when we start doing that, the people who didn't really like that, don't really like that you're doing that now, she's sticking up for herself, the dynamic shift. Just understand that that's going to happen, especially if it's an unhealthy relationship to begin with.
Tell me this, just kind of moving towards the end now, because you've given us so much in a short period of time. The value is incredible. And I think you're opening up a lot of people's eyes. What if you're the narcissist? What if there's someone listening here and they're going, well, that sounds a lot like me, the controlling aspect, and so on and so forth. But what do you say to these people? What do you tell them? They're not getting the abuse. They're giving the abuse. Is there trauma in there? Is there some reframing work that needs to be done for these people?
So if you're recognizing within yourself that you have those toxic traits, that you have those narcissistic traits, you're more than likely not a narcissist. Narcissists have, let me just say the basics right here, right? Narcissists lack empathy. They have zero empathy. They are very, very dissatisfied and deeply insecure, but they act like they're very arrogant. They're very confident. They come across a certain way. This is just generally speaking. I know, I could go on and on about describing narcissists and talking about experiences, but again, they're very pervasive. They suck people in, they get their enablers, they get their little troop around them, right? They get their people to do their dirty work. Oftentimes they're very entitled, but they're also the most entitled, but yet most dissatisfied people that I have ever come across. So there's that quality to them that they're very entitled to everything you have, your success, your happiness, your special days, your wedding, your birthday, your holidays. They're notorious for ruining holidays because the attention isn't all on them. So they love attention, but again, just because people are controlling, I've had times in my life where I've been very controlling because of the way I was raised. So I picked up some of these traits, right? Doesn't mean I'm a narcissist, but people who are reflecting right now and saying, oh gosh, she said controlling. I think I've been manipulative at times. Oh, am I a narcissist? No, you're not a narcissist. In fact, I would say you're more at a self-love deficit if you're worrying about, am I a narcissist because I'm with a narcissist? Did I catch narcissism? Narcissists are narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, is developed at a very early age, okay? It comes from trauma. And trauma can be neglect or emotional trauma, other types of trauma. Oftentimes, people with narcissism were overindulged as children, not all the time. So there's definitely things in childhood that molded these people into narcissists, just generally speaking right there. But if you're contemplating, am I a narcissist, and you're sitting here listening to this or watching right now, highly, highly, highly doubt it. Get in tune with yourself. Ask yourself, why am I thinking that, first of all? I would say maybe look into self-esteem work, look into self-worth work, give yourself some self-compassion. Maybe you've been around a narcissist for a long time and you're thinking you're picking up on some of those traits. I have clients that do that a lot, and I'm like, nope, stop it. Self-love deficit work, self-esteem work. And really ask yourself, okay, I'm controlling. Yeah, I've been selfish recently. I'm doing this. At least you're self-reflecting. A narcissist isn't going to sit there and self-reflect and have empathy and go, oh yeah, I treated my partner poorly. I've been really selfish lately. It's not going to happen. So ask yourself how you can work on those things within yourself, maybe a coach, therapy, read some books, etc., and really, work through that on your own. But I would just say, as far as a narcissist goes, lack of empathy, highly entitled individuals, They believe they are entitled to everyone's everything, but they are also very, very insecure and very, very dissatisfied people.
I see. Nicole, this has been awesome. Truly. Fantastic. I think the biggest thing that I gain from this, and I think other people will, is just really reflection. It's a time to reflect, and it's a time to see, at a deeper level, what's taking place within our relationships and within ourselves. And this has been very, very eye-opening. Any last words of wisdom or practicality, anything that speaks to you for people listening out there before we're done?
I would say if you are someone listening because you have anxiety, that you have probably been raised, and I urge you to just think about this. You've probably been raised to be a parent pleaser, and now you are a people pleaser. You may have codependent traits, and codependency comes from a deeply rooted toxic shame and guilt that was projected upon you by your parents. Whew, I know that's a lot. We're at the end here, but I wanted to get that out there. So if you feel like you're seeking validation, if you feel like you're always looking out and really not worried about others, but you're other focused in fixing and rescuing others, and you do so by also neglecting yourself, that's something you probably need to work on and think about how you were raised, that faulty programming. Also, setting those boundaries is going to be super important. I know we talked a lot about that. They are your most authentic decisions you'll make for yourself about what you will and won't tolerate in your life. You're allowed to have boundaries. It's your basic human right. It's your basic human right to stick up for yourself. Also about narcissism and narcissists. I, in my coaching, work with people who've gotten out of those relationships. I work on codependency recovery and setting boundaries. We talk about narcissistic abuse and narcissism a little bit, but I try to take the focus off of that. Again, let's not be other focused, right? I think the more we pathologize, knowledge is power. That's great. It's awareness, right? I think bringing an awareness to this is key, like you said, Dennis. But I think it's also great to become self-aware, aware of our own patterns, our own misalignments in order to get aligned and in order to really set those boundaries and protect our own energy. And I wasn't always this person. Believe me, it took me a long time. It took me growing up, realizing where I came from, getting married, and also having a business where I was just a people pleaser for many, many years to understand that boundaries are really the foundation to a balanced and aligned life. And when you don't grow up with boundaries, when you grow up in a home that's very, very authoritarian, where the parents are right, you're wrong, everyone else who doesn't believe what your family believes is wrong and bad, there's no boundaries, there's no beginning and end. It's all enmeshed, right? So you don't have a real sense of self. And I think a lot of people with anxiety can relate to this, what I'm about to say, that when you grow up in a home like that, it's like your intuition and your self-trust is stripped from you because you are not allowed to have your own thoughts and feelings. You have to have everyone else's thoughts and feelings. You're not allowed your own individuality. So that intuition and that self-trust gets stripped. That's what I identify with as someone who has anxiety, who has worked through anxiety. And I think a lot of people can relate based on the conversations I've had with my clients that I work with and with people in your group as a moderator, which I'm so grateful to be.
Beautiful.
I think a lot of us can relate to that on some level, that lack of self-trust and that lack of intuition, because it's been taken from us, because we had to enmesh. We had to be people we weren't. We didn't have boundaries. And you, Dennis, are allowed your own thoughts and feelings. I am allowed mine. We don't have to enmesh. Wow. We're allowed to be our individual souls. Right.
Someone's got to tell them that. And I'm glad you pointed that stuff out. I mean, this really is gold. I'm really happy to be able to do this episode today because it's going to open up a lot of minds out there. I know it. And to connect with you and to do sessions with you, website, how do people connect with you?
So I am at NicoleMichelle.coaching.com, NicoleMichelle coaching.com. I'm on TikTok at Life Coach Nicole and Instagram Life Coach NIC, Life Coach Nick, I am on Facebook, but I'm kind of getting away from that. So the other platforms, website's the best way to get a hold of me. I have a contact page there. I have a couple of my programs, my coaching. I have an hour of coaching people can purchase. I have coaching programs, workshops people can purchase as well. So I'm excited. I love doing this. I love helping people really be the best versions of themselves and undo that faulty programming and just really feel, I guess free would be the word. Free and peaceful, right? And like I always say, stay the course. If you feel like you're having a setback, you're really just having a challenge, which is an opportunity to grow. Learn from that challenge. I had some challenges this year. We all have. And I came out with just being more self-aware and more, I don't know. It was just like a feeling of this self-awareness and this feeling of being more free from things that were holding me back. So anytime you feel like, oh, I'm having a setback with boundaries or anxiety, or I'm getting back to this relationship with my mom or my partner, or, oh my gosh, people are driving me crazy. Remember your boundaries. Remember, we all share this experience and have that self-compassion. And don't let one, if you consider it a setback, I consider it just a challenge to learn from, an opportunity to grow. Don't let that railroad you for months on end. And part of that is that self-compassion and that self-esteem work that we talked about.
Beautiful. I will be adding all these links in the description. If you're watching on YouTube and on the podcast directory. So if you didn't pick up on the website and the other links, don't worry. They will be in the description, my friends. Nicole, an absolute pleasure. Let's do this again.
Yeah, would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The most powerful anxiety guidebooks on true anxiety recovery are now available on Amazon. Pick up Beyond Anxiety and F Coping, Start Healing, and supercharge your healing journey today. Also visit www.theanxietyguy.com to connect with Dennis and find the right online program for you. Remember, you are more than anxiety. See you in the next podcast episode.